Welcome back. Today we're starting a mini-series in looking at the design process I used to build a coffee table. That sounds good? Stick around. Hi and welcome to the Woodgrafter. I'm Andy Guile and our mission here is to inspire, educate and support you in your journey to becoming a better woodworker. We do that through a series of videos looking at tools, techniques and tips, step-by-step project guides, and now and then special series just like this one. So if you're not a subscriber, considering subscribe now, give me a thumbs up, leave a like in the comments and get in touch with the community. With that said, let's get started. So today I'm going to start a three-part series. I get a lot of questions saying to me, how do I go about my design? Now you've probably seen the designs that I use, and obviously there's work that goes into that. So I'm going to do 3 short episodes looking at the workflow I use to get to those final designs. The first one, the one we're looking at in this video, is going to focus very much on that customer engagement. Understanding the customer's requirements, getting some design influence and working out roughly what it is I'm going to do. The second step in my process is the concept design. That's where I take the knowledge that I've got and create a conceptual design I can then share with the customer. Very visual, very two-way, very collaborative, and that's where we adjust the design. The third part is then the workshop design. This is where I get enough detail in the drawing where I can actually produce a product and release the drawings to yourselves, of course. But it's also about the cost. It allows me to start to understand what it's going to cost me to build this project, and putting the various overheads on top, what am I going to charge the customer? So I've had a lot of requests for this, so I hope it's going to be interesting. Today we're going to focus on that initial customer engagement. So this is the diagram that started the overall coffee table design. It's a rough sketch that the customer pulled together. As you can see, it's a standard coffee table. It's got a top and it's got 4 legs and it's got some skirts either side. What makes this interesting is the inbuilt drawers. The customer wants to put a settee on this side of the table and a settee on the other side of the table, and this will then sit between the 2 sofas. So they want it to be a double-faced design. So there's going to be drawers on one side and drawers on the other side. Customers also come back and said they want quite a thick top on this one. We'll come back to the sizing of that top in a second. Now the table itself is going to sit on this rug. What I thought would be quite nice is if the table sat inside this centerpiece of the rug. The rug itself is 1,700mm in length and it's 1,200mm in width. Now this center panel is 1,240mm long and 760mm in width. And I think if the table were to sit inside here, that would look quite good with the sofas on either side of the rug. You'd still see this frame here that would then frame the table as well. Proportionally, I don't want the table to be this wide, so we're going to bring the table in a little bit on either side, but the overall length looks pretty good to me. So we're going to make the table 1,200mm long and we'll make it about 700mm wide. Now looking around the customer's house, we've got this, I guess you can call it an entertainment console. There's an Xbox here, Sky system, Apple TV shoved in the corner here, Amazon thing here, some speakers, obviously a television. But this is actually in the annex off the room that we're going to put our coffee table in. So we can use this to give us some design cues. And you can see the customer has got a similar rug to the one that we're going to put our table on top of in front of this unit. So there's obviously some design connectivity between this rug and this rug, so it'd be good if we have some sympathy with this design in the coffee table build. You can see these rather large legs at either end, and this is what the customer means by stumpy block feet. These are pretty big. They're 160 deep and 140mm wide, and on a piece this long that looks quite good. But if you look at this on the width of this, and this was just over 1/2 meter wide, it looks a little bit clunky to me. We'll copy this, but we won't go for that full width. We'll make these, I think, 80mm square, and we'll see how that looks on the SketchUp design. The other thing I like about this is the simplicity of the front of this. There's no handles, there's no raised panels. It's a very, very simple design. And we also want to take that design consideration. So when we build the drawers and this skirt, we'll make it look as if it's a single piece of wood running through the skirt, and there'll be no handles to break that up. And I think we'll probably use some concealed drawer runners, and I think we'll use some automated push to open, so you push the drawer in and then it opens. and that way we can keep this clean look, but we'll also get the advantage of a consistent grain run throughout this skirt, and that will give us quite a lot of sympathy for the simplicity of this design. Where I think we'll part company though is when we look at this overall top. Now you can see from this diagram, this top is set in between the legs, so the legs go full height. The skirts are then set down by 25mm, which is the thickness of this top, and then the top rests on top. The reason I'm not a fan of that is that the designer of this hasn't really allowed for expansion and contraction of the wood. And if you look at the grain run, I mean, this piece here is plain sawn, this piece here is plain sawn, this piece here looks like it could be quarter sawn. So there's no grain allowance for expansion and contraction, so this piece of wood will naturally expand and contract in this direction. You can already see the impact that that's having. This gap here is smaller than this gap here, and there's gaps beginning to appear here and here as this thing is struggling to find a place to go to. And you can also see at some point this has obviously tried to open up a little bit, and it started to open up this gap here at the bottom of the furniture. So I'm not really a fan of this design. Now you could do this, but you would need to be using quarter sawn stock, and the end grain you'd want to be running down the top in this direction all the way across. That would give you a very, very stable top that would not want to expand and contract in this direction. Any expansion will be up and down, and therefore that would give you the stability you need, but that would put a hell of a lot of money on the price to get that amount of quarter sawn stock for the top. So we need to be a little bit mindful of that. So for that reason, our top is not going to be inset, it's going to rest on the top, and we'll have a small overhang, and again that will give us a bit of symmetry as we place this thing on the rug. So that's looking pretty good so far. So now we understand the basic design, we understand the sizes, and we understand some of the design characteristics, the form that we're going to bring into the overall design. Now in terms of material, this is made of oak. I have ready access to two types of oak at a reasonable cost. I have this sample here, European oak, and this sample here, American white oak. Now look at the grain, don't worry about the colour just yet, but let's look at the grain profile. You can see that European oak is quite wavy in appearance, and the grain runs off at these angles, and it makes a really interesting visual. And European oak is also somewhat stronger than American white oak because that grain tends to be interlocked. And if you look at the American oak, you see you get these long grain runs throughout the material that looks quite attractive, and when this is plain sawn you do get some nice cathedrals on this. So if we look at the oak that's been used on this material, you can see that predominantly it's quite a nice long straight grain. You can see that running down the legs, you can see that running down the doors, you can see it running across here. And where it's been quarter sawn, you can start to see we get this rather nice swirls and arches and cathedrals in the face. So for me, that's looking like all the characteristics of American white oak. Now, although European oak is stronger, American white oak is a fantastic choice for fine furniture. It's still strong enough to allow us to mill it down to about an 18mm thickness, but still retain its integral strength. And that 18mm actually makes a nice feature on fine furniture rather than being forced to a higher 25mm, for example. So for those reasons, the grain orientation, the integral strength, and matching and being sympathetic with the design of what's already in the customer's house, American white oak is our oak of choice. It's also got the advantage that from my supplier, it's cheaper than European oak, strangely enough, so that's also a bonus because we are working to a budget. The material itself I'm going to bring down to 18mm thickness. That makes a nice feature on fine furniture. And the overall top, although this here is 25mm, we're going to increase the thickness of that to probably about 30mm, just to make it a little bit more of a statement and contrast nicely with the stumpy block feet. So that's it, we've got enough information to be dangerous, so now we can wander over to SketchUp and we can knock up the design. So there we go, we now have enough information to start to create a conceptual diagram that we can share with the customer. We'll look at that in the next video. See you soon.